The argument of people who support Phelan is that his plan 2 changed the scope of what was initially voted on, and that's why the treasurer would not certify that and pay for that at that reimbursement rate. And his argument, the reason that it changed the scope is because the initial approval was not a workable place. Even though you say he had facts and field, there was still the siting up near the Braintree line that was still on the table at that time, was it not?
The plan that he put forth involved the filling of some wetlands at Faxon Field. The state came back and said, why don't you put the building on the southern artery end? And then the city responded with a building on that end that was, in the state's opinion, that was exaggerated, the size of it, multiple stories, more stories than otherwise would be, because it didn't seem he wanted on that end of the field. That was the ongoing bickering and battling between the state and the mayor's office. I'd have to go back and look at every little detail between the state and the mayor's office, but the fact is, you know, he came into office, failed to put a plan forward for a year and a half in. Should have been prepared, in my opinion, within months to have something submitted to the state. Should have been working with the state. I mean, the fact is, it's a state program, and you know, it was then run by the school building authority in year 2 of his administration. It changed that first year. And in this business, you have to have relationships. You have to be able to work with people. And the finger pointing started, the blame game started. And in the end, I still don't believe he's accepted responsibility for the whole project. It's the failure or the additional cost, the failed leadership is always somebody else's fault. And then it was this legislature's fault at one point because the whole 90% legislation had changed. You know, the fact is, next door, Milton built 6 of them through this program. Here we are, just 6 years later, getting underway for the first building, and we lost the second building.
One of the things that you continually point out when the mayor talks about Mayor Sheets' proposal and the citing of it is that you always say that, you know, I wasn't an elected official, you know, it wasn't my responsibility. Yet you were a part of that administration. You were his chief of staff. And is it fair, is it not fair to tie you into not only the successes but the failures as well, given that you did have a prominent position in policy making in that administration?
Well, let me say this. If somebody come out and said, we got to thank Tom Koch, what a great job he did with the Thomas Crane Public Library, people would laugh. You had a mayor, you had a library board, you had a lot of people involved in that project. The fact is, I was executive secretary from 1990 to 1995. I became the park commissioner. I was well down at the park department when this issue came about, both the location and the whole funding issue. Did I have a relationship with the mayor at that time? Absolutely had a relationship with him. But being out of the office, that relationship changes as we go forward. Now, at the time of the issue at the high school, I actually did contact then Mayor Jim Sheets, and I was concerned about the location of the high school, not so much from the viewpoint of Bill Phelan, but it was just the location. It was going to be built behind the old Bradleys. It wasn't going to have a nice front door on Quincy Avenue. It was very much south on the border to the Braintree line. For those reasons, you know, I was more concerned about it. Did I believe the engineers said they could clean the site up and put a building there on that site, having it cleaned? It's been done all over the nation. I'm sure that probably could have happened. But it was more of the actual location itself. And I did send a letter to the mayor, quite a lengthy letter, to Mayor Sheets, and I think it was in 2000. I didn't bring it with me, I do have a copy of it. Essentially indicating in the end those concerns. And I actually made a suggestion of what I would do. And at that time, I suggested that he put an addition on the Quincy High School, renovate the existing building, and then take the President's City Motel site for a new Central Middle School. I actually put that in writing. I put it to him, I put it to the siting committee members and the Park and Recreation Board at the time. Mayor Fallon alluded that I supported the site in a public hearing, which is not accurate. There was a Park and Recreation Board meeting, which time the mayor had instructed me to come up with a design for fields in Faxon Park, which would accommodate the school on the abutting site. That was my job as the park director.
When you say that, you know, you were well out of the administration by 2000 when this started coming around, I mean, the first vote on this was in '97. But I remember that this was an issue back when I covered this area for Globe South back in the early '90s. I mean, it was an issue with Christine Cedrone and Sean Barry when they were running in '91 for school committee. So it's been an issue, a new building for Quincy High that's been on the table.
Actually, I think it was Central that was on the table. I think the Quincy High came a little bit later.
Central
has been on the table for a long time, but
okay.
Then it got.
But I mean, there's.
I don't know the exact time it got a little changed. When Quincy High became the priority over Central, I'm not sure exactly when that occurred, but Central was always the big issue. Quincy High did come later.
But I guess the thing that I'm trying to say is that it clearly did not get to the first council vote in '97 a month beforehand. I mean, it was developed prior to that, and you were involved in the Sheets administration at that point. If we just say Central, you were involved at that point. Why didn't you get it built then when you could have had 90%?
There was no 90% back then.
SBA was, I think they still did.
There was no SBA at that time. There was the Department of Education that oversaw school building construction. The 90% came under special legislation later. There was only 3 communities in the Commonwealth with the 90%, Quincy, Milton, and Swampscott. That was a new program. And we were the envy of the Commonwealth by getting that deal in. There was nobody that approached 90%. But unless you look at a Chelsea who was in receivership, basically get all this.
I mean, it was,
nothing. But
there were ways to get the reimbursement with desegregation and things like that. That could have approached 90%. I think that's how Milton did theirs, one of their first ones.
I'm not familiar with that yet.
But I mean, I guess the question I'm asking, Tom, is, you know, why wasn't anything done with Central in the '90s when you were talking about it?
You'll have to ask the superintendents at the time, the school committee members at the time. You know, the executive secretary's position, you're involved in a lot of day-to-day issues, most of which are non-education related. You know, you cover the council meetings, you deal with the councilors, and you coordinate all the department heads on the regular day-to-day issues, constituent services on a regular basis. Far more city side weighted than it is on the school side. And essentially, the main reason for that is you've got, beyond the mayor, you've got 6 independently elected school committee members on the school side. You know, and just on the whole process of government, the way it's set up, there is less involvement. There's some involvement, sure, but certainly less involvement. Certainly wasn't on my radar screen as executive secretary. I could point to a number of things that were on my radar screen at the time. You know, a lot of public projects I was involved with, utilities going underground, point person on different things. Granted, Links Golf Course, I mean, I chaired the original committee, oversaw the initial part of that. I mean, there were a number of projects I had on my plate. Schools was never really on my plate, so to speak, as executive secretary.
Speaking of the school committee, Boston went to an appointed school committee a few years back. I think it was the second term of Menino when they eliminated the elected school board. Is that something that you would favor for Quincy, or do you think they should retain the elected school board?
Quite frankly, I've never given that any thought. So at this point, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't think we have any major problems with our elected school committee. We've had some good people serve over the years. I have no problem the way the system works right now.